Today, Daddy is going to tell you a story called Pierre's Dream by Jennifer Armstrong. Some time ago, in the town of Apt, which is not far from Avignon, there lived a lazy, foolish man named Pierre. He had no job, no interest, and no hobby besides sitting under the olive trees in the afternoon, thinking of dinner. One day, Pierre walked aimlessly through a field, nibbling sunflower seeds and splitting out the husks. In this field was a large tree, and Pierre sat under it to rest. In no time at all, he fell asleep and snored loudly enough to startle the crowds. While he slept, the Grand Circus de L'Etoiles pitched its tent in the field, ranged its painted wagons around, and sprung up a rope corral for the trick ponies. When Pierre awoke, it was to find himself in the midst of a bustling village that had been there before. "Aha!" he said. "I must be dreaming." He rose and looked about him. He had a wonderful sense of accomplishment. All he surveyed, all was his dream. Pierre was very pleased with himself. As he stood admiring the work of his imagination, a shout of alarm filled the air. "The lion! He has escaped!" Dozens of circus folk fled past Pierre, their colored costumes twinkling in the sunshine. Then, bounding around the corner, came a dreadful, snarling lion. His teeth gleamed. His roars made the leaves tremble on the trees. Pierre felt a bit nervous. "Very realistic," he murmured. But as it was his dream, so he thought, he had no fear. "For, of course, I can wake up at any time," he reminded himself. And so, smiling confidently, Pierre held up one hand. "Stop lying," he commanded. "Back, go back." So strong was Pierre's voice that the lion stopped his charge. He peered around, and then, with his tail tucked between his legs, the lion turned and slunk back to his cage. "Well, that's that," Pierre said. "I'm enjoying this dream very much." "Oh, monsieur, you're so brave," called out the dainty trapeze artist from the height above. Pierre smiled modestly. "May I join you?" "Mademoiselle?" "Please do," she replied, twirling her parasol. Pierre examined the pole to which the high wire was strung. He would never attempt such a thing normally, but as it was his dream, also he thought, Pierre knew he would climb with no effort at all. Up he went, hand over hand to the air. At the top he had a magnificent view of the countryside all around. "Yoo-hoo!" called the drainy trapeze artist from the far end of the wire. Pierre bowed like a courtier and stepped boldly onto the high wire. It swayed and dipped under his foot. "Very realistic," he murmured. But as it was his dream, also he thought, he had no fear. Pierre walked without hesitation to the middle of the wire. A crowd of circus folk stared up from below. "I'll give them a thrill," Pierre said to himself. "Oh!" The crowd gasped as he stood on one foot. "Ah!" The crowd sighed as he hopped up and clicked his heels together. "Oh!" The crowd moaned as Pierre stood on his hands. With that, Pierre slipped cheerfully to the end of the wire and kissed the trapeze artist's hand. He was enjoying his dream very much. "Can you also swallow swords?" asked the snake charmer. "Can you also juggle fire?" asked the bearded lady. Can you also lie down beneath the elephant's foot? Asked the son of the red-haired clown. Pierre answered all these questions with a smile and a nod. But, of course, he replied. In dreams, he knew one can do anything. The circus folks voted to make him their ringmaster as the owner of the Grand Circus de Latoya was in bed with a stomachache. Pierre put on the top hat and tailcoat and stretched out his leg for two small boys to polish the tall black boots. It's Pierre! Gasped the crowd when he stepped into the ring. Pierre! Pierre! Pierre bowed to the audience. They knew him, of course, for why shouldn't the people of Apt also be in his dream? They all think I'm a lazy, foolish man, Pierre told himself. Tonight they shall see they're wrong. Pierre cracked his whip, sending the ponies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pretty ponies cantered into the ring, tossing their manes and setting the bells on their headdresses a jingle. Pierre stood in the center, cracking his whip and kept the pony at a spirited pace. What will he do? The audience wondered aloud. What is Pierre up to? The dust flew from the under pony's hoofs and tickled Pierre's nose. The wind from their passing fanned his cheeks. Very realistic, he murmured. Then, with a victorious cry, he leaped onto the back of the nearest pony and stood up with his arms crossed. The audience cheered. Pierre, what a marvel! Superb! After riding each tricky pony in turn, Pierre sent them galloping out of the ring and ordered in the knife thrower. Then, to the astonishment of the audience, he calmly allowed the one-eyed man to throw 17 daggers around him. After he hung by one foot from the trapeze, while juggling flaming hoops above cage of tiger and panthers from the east, the beast roared horribly, and the flame singed Pierre's eyebrows. But as it was his dream, so he thought he had no fear. He went on to perform many other daring and death-defying feats, and the audience greeted each new act with a wild applause. Pierre! What skill and courage! Extraordinary! By the end of the evening, Pierre had put on nearly the entire circus single-handedly. After the last spectator left the tent, the circus folk lined up and clapped for Pierre as he trod wearily across the sawdust. You must rest, whispered the dainty trapeze artist. Pierre nodded. He was tired. Never before had a dream lasted so long, nor left him so fatigued. The sickly ringleader rode on a goat cart. The Grand Circus did the toy thanks you, he muttered to Pierre. It was my pleasure, Pierre replied. With that, he went out and gazed up to the stars in the sky, a long dream and a very full one, he decided. Then he sat down under a tree and closed his eyes. When at last he opened them again, the sun was high in the sky, and the field around him was empty. What a dream! Pierre explained. Stretching his arms, he smiled and gazed around him contentedly. There was nothing special he wanted to do. There never was. He was truly a lazy, foolish man, with no job, no interest, and no hobby besides sitting under the olive tree in the afternoon, thinking of dinner. With a yawn, Pierre leaned back against the tree and knocked the black top hat over his eyes. What's this? He asked in astonishment. He looked wildly around, bewildered and bemused. Next to the tree on the ground was the draining parasol with a slip of paper pinned to the frill. Pierre picked it up in a trembling hand. Au revoir, Pierre, he read. Slowly, Pierre began to smile. Then he began to laugh. And as he looked up through the leaves of the olive tree, he had much more to think of than just his dinner. The end. Yeah, that's the end of the story. Yeah, I'll give you another story tomorrow.